In a quiet suburb of busy Tokyo, there is a tale so chilling that it continues to haunt the community decades later. The story revolves around a local resident named Toyama Yoshi, whose life took a sinister turn in the spring of 1988. This case, now known as the Mirror Man, was not just an account of a man's struggle with his terrifying condition, but a chilling reminder of how the human mind could sometimes be a doorway to horrifying experiences that defy explanation. Was it just Toyama's battle with his inner self, or maybe something paranormal and much darker? It is on you to decide. Sometimes, the line between sanity and insanity blurs, leaving us in a terrifying gray area where reality and unreality intermingle. The story of Toyama is a chilling testament to this, a descent into the dark abyss that began with a simple reflection in the mirror. Toyama was your typical middle-aged man, living a quiet life in a small suburban area of Tokyo. He was a high school history teacher, well-liked by his students and respected by his colleagues. To anyone looking in from the outside, he had a perfect life, a loving wife, 2 healthy children, and a peaceful home. One sunny afternoon in April of 1988, Toyama was tidying up the bathroom, wiping down the mirror when he noticed something odd. As he looked at his reflection, it seemed to lag, like a poorly synced video. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but the anomaly persisted. He shook it off as fatigue, attributing it to the late nights spent grading papers. But little did he know, this was the beginning of a nightmare that would eventually consume his life. In the following weeks, the reflection started behaving independently. Toyama would brush his teeth, and the reflection would just stand still, watching him. There were times when it would smile menacingly, its eyes cold and devoid of the warmth that Toyama knew he carried in his own. He would lock eyes with his reflection, the deep-seated malice in its gaze sending chills down his spine. Then the whisperings started. He'd stand before the mirror, and the reflection would start mouthing words. At first they were inaudible, but over time he could hear them clearly, a guttural voice that sounded eerily like his own, instructing him to do terrible things, to hurt those he loved. Toyama was a man of logic. He had always scoffed at supernatural tales, but the reality he was living was becoming too surreal, too terrifying to ignore. He attempted to confide in his wife Minamoto, but how could he explain that his reflection was threatening him without sounding insane? The fear of alienating his family and losing everything he held dear forced him to suffer in silence. His life quickly became a terrifying cycle of fear and paranoia. He started avoiding mirrors, but he could still hear the sinister whispers in his mind. At school, he lost focus, his normally vibrant lectures turning into rambling monologues. At home, he was a shadow of his former self, withdrawn and increasingly agitated. With each passing day, Toyama found himself gradually losing control. There was a dark impulse growing within him, an urge to follow the sinister instructions of his reflection. He could feel a palpable darkness enveloping him, a malignant force compelling him to act on these horrific thoughts. It was a living nightmare, one that he was desperate to wake up from. In a desperate attempt to regain control of his life, he decided to seek professional help. He made an appointment with a renowned psychologist, Dr. Nagano. As he narrated his experiences, he could see the concern etching into Nagano's face. This marked the end of the first chapter of Toyama's life, a chapter filled with an escalating terror that was just the prelude to a deeper horror yet to unfold. The people in his life, his students, colleagues, friends, and family, were oblivious to his internal torment. They were on the brink of being drawn into a chilling tale, an ordeal that would forever alter their lives. Following his first meeting with Dr. Nagano, Toyama was given a diagnosis that grounded his experiences in reality, at least to an extent. Dissociative identity disorder, he said, a rare and controversial condition where 2 or more distinct identities alternately control a person's behavior. It was a tentative diagnosis, with Dr. Nagano recommending further assessment. As unsettling as it was, it gave Toyama hope. If it was a psychological condition, it could be treated. He could get his life back. Yet in the depths of his mind, there lingered a seed of doubt. The reflection in the mirror, the menacing whisperings. It was too real to be a mere mental disorder. Toyama continued his life, striving for normalcy amidst the chaos. Therapy sessions became a part of his routine. The drugs prescribed helped, muffling the sinister whispers, creating a sense of distance between him and his reflection. But this sense of calm was fleeting. In the solitude of the night, when the effects of the medication faded, he would once again find himself locked in a psychological battle with his malicious reflection. The threatening commands became more intense, the urge to act on them stronger. It was as if the reflection was growing impatient, its demands more persistent and violent. One evening, as he stood in front of the bathroom mirror, his reflection instructed him to hurt Minamoto, his loving wife. A wave of terror washed over him as he visualized the act, his hands trembling, beads of sweat trickling down his forehead. This was a woman he loved with all his heart, the mother of his children, his life partner. But the darkness in his mind was compelling, consuming him from within. Fearful of what he might do, Toyama distanced himself from his family. He spent most of his time locked in his study, leaving only when necessary. His once joyful home was now marred by a pall of worry and confusion. His relationship with Minamoto began to strain under the weight of his inexplicable behavior. His children, too young to understand the gravity of the situation, were left puzzled and worried by their father's sudden change. But Toyama was too caught up in his internal struggle to provide them with the reassurances they needed. The once beloved history teacher was now a man on the verge of ruin. His relationships were fraying, his career dwindling, and his sanity teetering on the edge. But worse was yet to come. As Toyama battled the demons in his mind, an incident occurred that sent his world spiraling further into chaos. One fateful day, as Toyama was locked in his study, huddled over stacks of old history books, he felt an eerie chill sweep over him. His study was devoid of mirrors, a refuge from his terrifying reflection. But as he turned his gaze towards the polished surface of an antique bowl on his desk, he saw it, his reflection staring back at him, the sinister smirk etched on its face, the cold malice radiating from its eyes. His heart pounded in his chest as the reflection began to speak. This time, the command was horrifying beyond anything Toyama could imagine. The reflection demanded a sacrifice. A life. The life of his own son. The twisted grin on its face, the way it savored every word, was beyond any form of human sanity. Terror gripped Toyama. Was this his disorder, spiraling out of control? Or was it, as he had begun to suspect, something far more sinister? The rational part of his mind still clung to his diagnosis, arguing that these horrifying commands were merely manifestations of a fractured psyche. But the terrifying reality of his experiences suggested something else. Driven to desperation, Toyama decided to confide in his wife, Minamoto. It was a difficult conversation, laying bare his darkest fears. The chilling commands and the terrifying reflection, the growing urge to submit. It was a confession that shook Minamoto to her core, but the love for her husband and a desperate desire to help him kept her grounded. She suggested a spiritual approach, thinking that perhaps what Toyama was experiencing was beyond the realm of psychology. In their desperation, they reached out to a local kannushi named Kai, known for his open-mindedness toward such matters. In Japan, kannushi is a respected person responsible for the maintenance of Shinto shrines. One foggy day at Shinto shrine, Toyama recounted his experiences, his voice barely more than a whisper. Kai listened attentively, his expression hard to read. When Toyama finished, Kai remained silent for a moment, then suggested that what Toyama was experiencing could indeed be something more malevolent, a dark entity trying to gain control. He offered to bless their home, to offer some protection against the potential supernatural force at play. Toyama and Minamoto agreed, willing to try anything that could possibly end this nightmare. As they stepped back into their home that evening, they felt a glimmer of hope. But deep inside, Toyama could feel the chilling presence of his reflection, waiting for its chance to surface. He knew this was far from over. As the sun set on Tokyo, Toyama braced himself for the storm that was brewing, the final chapter of his harrowing ordeal. Despite the spiritual intervention, the horrifying encounters didn't cease. If anything, they grew more intense, more menacing. The cruel face in the mirror seemed to delight in his fear. its smirk more twisted with each encounter. It demanded compliance, its commands echoing in Toyama's head in a chilling chorus. It wanted a sacrifice, and it would not be denied. Even in his dreams, Toyama couldn't escape his tormentor. Visions of violence, of bloodshed, painted his dreams in horrifying shades of red. He dreamt of a sacrificial dagger gleaming under the pale moonlight, its cruel edge poised over his son's heart. Each morning, he'd wake up gasping, his sheets soaked in cold sweat, the phantom sensation of blood on his hands. He sought solace in the warm embrace of his wife, in the innocent smiles of his children. Yet he could feel the darkness within him growing stronger, his control slipping away with each passing day. His reflection, once a silent observer, was now a puppeteer, pulling his strings, trying to bend him to its cruel will. One particularly chilling night, as Toyama stood before the bathroom mirror, his reflection issued a final ultimatum. The time for the sacrifice was the next night. He could see it in the reflection's cruel eyes, hear it in its malicious whispers. A day was all he had. A day before the reflection claimed control completely. Fear coiled in his gut, squeezing the life out of him. Desperate and cornered, he made a decision. A terrifying decision, but the only one he could see that might end this nightmare. If the reflection wanted a life, it could have his. Early next morning, Toyama kissed his wife and kids for the last time. Their smiles were his last memories as he headed towards the garage. Inside the enclosed space, he started the car and waited as the exhaust fumes began to fill the room. He left behind a long note explaining his actions. It was a final goodbye, a confession, an attempt to shield his family from the horrors he was facing. His death was discovered hours later, leaving his family and neighborhood in shock. The jovial history teacher, the loving husband, the caring father was gone. His death raised more questions than it answered. His note, with its chilling tale, left people wondering, was it the tragic end of a man plagued by mental health issues? Or was it the chilling finale of a supernatural ordeal? The truth died with Toyama, leaving behind a mystery that continued to haunt his loved ones.